The great chamber of the Concorde was silent. It was a silence that felt heavy, like thick cloth pressing down on the ears. The air itself smelled of old stone, clean water, and a faint, sweet scent like rain on leaves. Around a massive, circular table made of smooth lunar rock, the leaders of the Galactic Concorde sat. Their faces, or what passed for faces, were etched with a worry that was centuries old. On one side, floating in a clear liquid tank, was Ambassador Nal of the Solen. His sleek, gray form drifted gently, gills fluttering. Next to him, Chancellor Kix of the XYL sat perfectly still. His body was like multifaceted crystal, catching the soft chamber light and throwing tiny rainbows on the table. There were others, the stout, rocky form of a stonefolk chieftain, the feathered and sharp-eyed Talonor generals. But all attention was on the figure at the head. Elder Nissa of the Veridi was ancient. Her body was like a graceful, willow-like tree, her skin bark-like and smooth, her eyes the deep green of a forest shadow. She moved slowly with a rustling sound. When she spoke, her voice was not a sound in the air, but a vibration felt in the mind, calm and terribly sad. The Cthar hive moves again, she thought to them all. A holographic star map flickered to life above the table. A sector of space, marked in peaceful blue, was being consumed by a creeping, pulsing red stain. They have taken the glyph systems. The Mellani colonies are gone. We hear only silence from there now. A Talonor general, named Gore, sharpened his beak-like mouth. Then we muster the fleet. We meet them at the Nebula of Tears. Our new plasma lances will tear their bioships apart. His voice was a quick, sharp clatter. Your bravery is noted, General Gore, came the gentle, watery telepathy of Ambassador Nal. But our fleets have met theirs 3 times in this cycle. We lose more ships each time. Their ships learn. They adapt. Then we must adapt faster. Gore insisted. It was then that Elder Nissa raised a slender, woody hand. The chamber fell silent again. There is another factor, potential ally, or a potential storm. The hologram shifted. The red stain of the Cthar and the blue fields of the Concorde shrank. The view pulled back across the galactic spiral to a quiet, unremarkable arm. It zoomed in on a single yellow star. A small blue and green planet orbited it. Data scrolled beside it. Sol 3. Designation, Earth. Species, humanity. Status, pre-contact Tier 3 civilizational development. Some of the younger species leaned forward. A new ally? A military force they had overlooked? We have observed them for many of their years, Nissa continued. Her mental voice grew even more grave. We have watched their history. It is not like ours. The Concorde was built over millennia on shared philosophy, on peaceful first contact, on slow and careful growth. The hologram now showed images of human history, not their cities or their art, but quick, flashing glimpses. Ancient armies clashing with swords and spears, the horrific clouds of great world wars, the terrifying flash of nuclear fire. Then, the same species, building delicate vessels that sailed to their moon, sending brave explorers into the void. They are a species of deep contradiction, Nissa explained. They create breathtaking beauty and inflict unspeakable cruelty, often within the same generation. They are not unified by a single purpose. They are driven by a chaotic mix of curiosity, fear, ambition, and a desperate need to belong. This makes them unpredictable. General Gore scoffed. They are primitive. Look at their technology. Chemical rockets? Fission power? We have had anti-gravity and singularity drives since before their planet cooled. What can they possibly do? It is not what they have. Nissa's thought was firm, like a root pushing through stone. It is what they are. In their recorded history, peace is the exception. War is the constant. They have waged war on their own planet, on their own kind, in every environment imaginable. They have turned the science of building into the art of demolition. They see a wall and they immediately calculate a dozen ways to break it, go over it, or tunnel under it. They do not accept limits. They see them as puzzles to be solved, and they will solve them, even if the solution is terrifying. Chancellor Kick spoke, his voice a chime-like sound. You speak of them as if they are a natural disaster, Elder. Not a people. In a crisis, the distinction can blur, Nissa replied. I caution you, do not summon them. Do not bring their unique talents into this war. To ask for their help is to grasp a plasma torch to light your way. It will certainly cut through the darkness, but you cannot control what else it will burn. The debate erupted. The militant Talioner and the pragmatic Stonefolk argued for contact. We are facing extinction. We need soldiers, we need new tactics. This chaos they have might be exactly what we need to break the Cthar pattern. The elder races, the Veridi, the Solen, the XYL counseled immense caution. You do not understand. Ambassador Eniel pulsed, bubbles rising in his tank. You see a tool. We see a force of nature. Once unleashed, it cannot be put back. For hours, the debate swirled. The younger species saw only a short-lived, divided, technologically inferior race. A resource, a weapon to be aimed. The elders saw the deep scars on humanity's soul, the incredible engine of conflict that powered them. Finally, a vote was called. The procedure was slow, formal. Each species cast its will into the chamber's central crystal. It glowed, tallying the result. The light settled. The motion to initiate contact with humanity of Soul 3 had failed. By a narrow margin, but it had failed. General Gore let out a frustrated click. You are letting old fear doom us all. When the Cthar are at our throats, you will remember this cowardice. Elder Nissa simply watched him, her ancient eyes full of a pity that spans stars. No, General. If that day comes, and we are desperate enough to call them, it is not our cowardice we will remember. It will be our desperation, and we will fear what answers the call. The council adjourned. The Concord would fight the Cthar with its own fleets, its own traditions, its own honorable tactics. The file on humanity was sealed, marked with the highest level of caution. The Elder's warning hung in the air of the empty chamber, a silent, unheeded prophecy. The war would be fought the Concord's way. For now, the war did not go as the Concord hoped. The Cthar hive was a wave that did not break. It advanced system by system, and it learned. The Concord fought with honor and with powerful technology. Their ships were marvels of energy shielding and precise gravity weapons. They fought in elegant formations, communicating with perfect clarity. The Cthar fought like a virus. Their ships were not built. They were grown. They were ugly, organic things that looked like drifting chunks of asteroid or giant silent beetles. They did not have shields. They had incredibly thick, adaptive armor that hardened against whatever weapon hit it first. A Talioner plasma lance would be devastating in the first battle. In the second battle, the Cthar ships would have grown a new, crystalline layer that scattered the plasma. In the third battle, they would be nearly immune. The great battle at the Nebula of Tears was a disaster. General Gore led the combined Talioner and Stonefolk fleets. They met the Cthar with brilliant lines of fire. For an hour, it seemed they were winning. Then the Cthar did something new. They did not attack the warships. They launched thousands of small, fast pods at the Concord support vessels, the fuel haulers, the repair ships, the hospital barges. The pods attached and began to melt through the hulls, releasing swarms of smaller, insect-like creatures inside. The Concord battle line shattered as ships tried to protect the defenseless support fleet. In the confusion, the main Cthar fleet pushed forward. They did not destroy the Concord ships. They surrounded them. They used strange organic cables to latch on, and then they began to digest. The reports from the dying captains were filled with sounds of tearing metal and horrible, wet, chewing noises. Then silence. General Gore's flagship barely escaped. When it limped back to the Concord home base, the mood in the command center was one of cold terror. The holographic star map was a nightmare. The red stain of the Cthar was now deep into Concord space. Key agricultural worlds, mining colonies, and 2 major shipyard systems were gone. The Cthar were not just defeating them. They were consuming their resources, their technology, their very territory to fuel their own growth. Emergency councils were called. Elder Nissa and the other senior species said little. Their solemn silence was worse than any "I told you so." The younger species, who had been so confident, were now desperate. Arguments flew around the room. We must fall back to the core worlds. Create an impenetrable defense. We do not have the resources. They will just surround us and wait. We need a new weapon, something they cannot adapt to. There is no time to develop it. It was then that a Talonor junior strategist, a sharp-eyed female named Rhea, spoke up. Her voice was quiet but cut through the noise. There is the other option, the one we voted against. The room went very still. All eyes turned to the sealed file still hovering in the data stream. Sol 3. Humanity. General Gore, his feathers still scorched from the battle, shook his head. No. The elders were clear. It is too dangerous. Dangerous compared to what? Rhea shot back, gesturing at the map of encroaching red. To extinction? They are a species of war, you said it yourself. They fight in ways we cannot imagine. The Kthar learn our patterns. They have never seen a human pattern. It might be the only thing they cannot adapt to. The elders protested. Ambassador Nal's water churned. You are thinking of using a wildfire to stop a flood. You may drown and burn. We are drowning right now, shouted a stonefolk commander, slamming a heavy fist on the table. Let us at least die fighting with every tool we have. The debate was short and bitter. Fear of the Kthar had finally become greater than fear of the elders' warning. A new vote was taken. This time the result was different. The motion passed. They would send a signal. But it was not an invitation, not a formal request for alliance. It was a bare, raw scream for help. A senior Talonor communications officer, shamed and terrified, drafted the message. It contained the coordinates of the war front, basic information on the Kthar biology and ship types, and a simple, repeating pulse. Catastrophic existential threat. Any sentient force. Assist. Repeat. Assist.it was the most undignified, desperate thing the Concord had ever done. It was a blind shout into the dark. They did not direct it only to Earth. They aimed it toward that entire quiet spiral arm, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear it and be both able and willing to come. Elder Nissa watched the powerful signal blast out from the great array. It would travel faster than light, carried on subspace waves. It would reach the human solar system in a matter of days. She felt a profound sadness, deeper than the fear of the Kthar. She had seen the embers of humanity's spirit in the data. She knew what desperation looked like in their eyes. And now the Concord had shown them its own. We have not asked for warriors, she thought to herself, alone in her garden under an artificial sun. We have screamed in pain, and creatures that know pain, that are shaped by it, are the ones most likely to answer a scream. May the stars forgive us. The message raced through the void, a silent cry of a dying civilization. The Concord turned back to its failing defenses, hoping for a miracle, and deeply afraid of what form that miracle might take. They had ignored the caution. Now, they could only wait and see if their desperation would be answered. On Earth, the signal was not heard by presidents or generals first. It was heard by Ji-hyun. She was a junior analyst at the Deep Space Telemetry Array, a quiet facility nestled in the mountains of South Korea. Her job was to listen to the silence between the stars, sorting the natural cosmic noise from anything else.it was the end of a long, dull shift. The room was dark, lit only by the soft glow of monitor screens. Ji-hyun was about to log off when a soft, persistent chime sounded from her console. It was not a normal pattern. It was too structured, too clean. A ripple of data scrolled across her screen. At first, she thought it was a glitch, maybe a satellite reflection. But the coding was complex, layered. Her fingers flew over the keys, initiating the decryption protocols. Slowly, the message resolved. Galactic coordinates. Biological data on something called a Kthar drone. Schematics of a living ship that made her skin crawl. And then, the repeating pulse, translated by the system into cold, clear text. Catastrophic existential threat. Any sentient force. Assist. Her breath caught in her throat. This was real. This was not a test. She immediately flagged it as a Priority 1 event. Alarms, soft but insistent, began to sound in the facility. Within minutes, her supervisor was over her shoulder, his face pale. Within an hour, the data was shooting up the chain of command, from the United Earth Space Command in Geneva to the Planetary Defense Council. The world's leaders were stunned. For decades, humanity had searched for signs of other life, imagining peaceful first contact. They had never imagined a desperate, galactic war knocking at their door. The debate in the secure council chambers was frantic. We cannot get involved in an alien war. We would be insects to them. They are asking for help. It is a moral imperative. It is a suicide mission. Look at the scale of this conflict. The military commanders, however, were quiet. They studied the data, the Cthar biology, the ship specifications, the tactical logs the Concorde had foolishly included. Admiral Min-Su, a veteran of Earth's earlier resource conflicts, saw something the politicians did not. He saw patterns. He saw that the Concorde fought a certain logical way. He saw that the Cthar had learned that logic and broken it. He saw a puzzle. They don't need our strength, he said finally, his voice calm in the noisy room. They have more than enough. They need a different kind of mind. They need someone who does not fight by their rules. The decision was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth would answer, not with their entire fledgling space force, but with a single dedicated task force. It would be built around their newest and only true interstellar warship, the UES Dauntless, and supported by a handful of refitted vessels. Mining ships turned into carriers, old orbital defense platforms given new engines. They called it Task Force Aegis. It was not an army. It was an experiment. Weeks of frantic preparation followed. The best were chosen. Captain June of the Dauntless was a tactical genius who hated textbook solutions. Pilot Taemin, a former asteroid miner, could fly a shipping container through a debris field if he had to. Engineer Subin was a quiet woman who could make broken systems work better than they ever had when new. They were not the perfect soldiers of Concorde fantasy. They were problem solvers. The day came. From a high orbit over Mars, Task Force Aegis assembled. To human eyes, it looked impressive, a blend of sleek, angular warships and blocky, practical support craft. To the eyes of the Concorde scout ship hiding nearby, cloaked and observing, it looked pathetic. The scout's captain, a Talioner named Vec, watched in disbelief. The human ships were slow by Concorde standards. Their power signatures were weak. Their weapon mounts looked crude. One ship even appeared to be a converted chemical processor vessel. Disgusted, Vec sent the report back to command. The human response has arrived. It is negligible, a gesture at best. Recommend we thank them and send them home. The Concorde High Command, now based on a besieged fortress world, was crushed. Their last hope was a joke. But they had no other options. They sent coordinates for a rendezvous in a barren system on the edge of the war zone, a place called Charon's Reach. When Task Force Aegis dropped out of its faster-than-light travel at the edge of Charon's Reach, the Concorde fleet was already there. It was a battered remnant of its former glory. Sleek ships scarred and burned, their beautiful lines broken, and they dwarfed the human vessels. The Dauntless looked like a child's toy next to a Concorde dreadnought. A holographic link was established. In the war room of the Concorde flagship, General Gore and the other commanders stood, trying to hide their disappointment. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Admiral Min-Su appeared before them. He was an older man with a kind, lined face. He did not look like a fierce warrior. He looked like a grandfather. "I am Admiral Min-Su of United Earth," he said, his voice translated by the systems. "We received your signal." General Gore nodded stiffly. "We welcome your assistance. Your ships will be integrated into our third defensive wing. Your commanders will receive our tactical protocols." Min-Su shook his head, a small, polite smile on his face. "Thank you, General, but that will not be possible. We will fight as a single, integrated unit, under my command." The Concorde room erupted in murmured clicks and rumbles. "Preposterous," a Stonefolk commander boomed. You have no experience. You will be destroyed. Minsu's smile didn't waver. With respect, your experience has brought you here, to the edge of defeat. You fight the Kthar. We will fight to win. Give us our sector. Supply us with what real-time data you can, and let us work. There was a long, tense silence. The Concord leaders communicated silently, desperately. They had no leverage. They had asked for help, and this was what had come. To refuse it now was to admit total hopelessness. Finally, General Gore gave a sharp, grudging nod. Very well. You will have the collapsing flank in the Hyades cluster. Do not expect us to save you when your experiment fails. The link cut. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain June let out a low breath. They're not happy. Admiral Minsu looked at the view screen, at the magnificent, wounded Concord fleet. They wanted a bigger version of themselves, he said. They didn't get it. Now, let's show them what they actually called for. He turned to his crew. All right, let's get to work. The Concord gave Task Force Aegis a section of the front line that was already considered lost. It was in the Hyades cluster, near a lifeless planet designated HY-77. The Concord commanders saw it as a way to keep the unpredictable humans out of the way while they planned a real defense elsewhere. They expected the humans to dig in, to build fortifications and try to hold the line. They expected a traditional and quickly ended last stand. The humans did not dig in. First, they sent out the small, fast scout ships. But these scouts were not just looking for the enemy fleet. Pilot Taemin, flying a nimble craft that was little more than an engine and a sensor array, skimmed through asteroid fields. He was not mapping Kthar positions. He was mapping the space itself. Gravity gradients, mineral deposits, radiation pockets. He sent the data back to the Dauntless. On the Dauntless, Admiral Minsu and Captain June studied the information not like soldiers, but like engineers. Here, June said, pointing to a dense field of metallic asteroids. Their big ships avoid this. Too much dust and debris for their organic hulls. It irritates them. Minsu nodded. And this gas cloud here, it's rich in potassium isotopes. Useless to us, but our probes show the Kthar tend to cluster near it. Maybe it's a nutrient source. Meanwhile, Engineer Subin was in the main hangar of the support ship Forge. She wasn't working on weapons. She was looking at the biological data from the Concord signal. She focused on the Kthar ship's description as living systems with internal nutrient flows. She had an idea. It was a strange, almost silly idea, born from her time-fixing chemical processors on a lunar outpost. She asked for samples of non-toxic, carbon-based industrial lubricant, the kind used on human machinery. Then, she asked for a high-frequency energy emitter, the sort used for deep scans. Alone in her lab, she began to run simulations. The first Kthar probe arrived a day later. It was a single, spiny ship moving to scout the new arrivals. The Concord protocol was clear. Destroy it with concentrated fire before it could report. Captain June gave a different order. Let it see us. Just look busy. Move the support ships around in a random pattern. Power up weapons, but don't fire. The human fleet moved in what looked like confusion. The Kthar probe observed for a few minutes, then turned to leave, presumably to report that the new enemies were disorganized and weak. Taemin, June said over the comm, it's heading back through asteroid field beta. You know the tight corridor near the big nickel iron rock? I know it. Taemin's voice crackled back. Get ahead of it. Drop payload Gamma. Payload Gamma was not a mine. It was a canister of the lubricant Subin had been working on, mixed with fine metallic dust. Taemin's ship raced ahead, hidden by the asteroids. He placed the canister in the middle of the narrow corridor and left. When the Kthar probe entered the corridor, a remote signal triggered the canister. It burst, creating a wide, shimmering cloud of harmless goo and dust. The probe flew right through it. The sticky substance coated its hull. Annoyed, the probe continued on its way, reporting the weak human positions. 2 hours later, a full Kthar attack wing emerged from warp. There were 20 of the beetle-like bioships. They moved to surround the human fleet, which seemed to be retreating in a clumsy formation. The Concorde commanders watching from afar felt a sick disappointment. It was happening just as they predicted. Then, Captain June said, "Activate the scrubber signal." All across the human ships, the high-frequency emitters that Subin had modified came online. They emitted a very specific, pulsing energy signature. It was not a weapon. It was a frequency that reacted with the chemical bonds in the industrial lubricant. On the hulls of the Cthar ships, the harmless goo suddenly changed. Heated rapidly by the energy pulse, it underwent a quick, nasty chemical reaction, turning into a thick, acidic tar that burned and clogged the ship's porous outer layers. It was like giving them a severe skin rash. The ships didn't explode. They began to writhe, their smooth movements becoming jerky and pained. Their coordination broke down. One ship, trying to scrape the substance off on an asteroid, crashed into another. "Now standard kinetics," June ordered. The human ships, which had seemed so weak, turned. Their main weapons were not energy beams. They were mass drivers, giant railguns that fired solid tungsten rods at a fraction of light speed. They were simple, brutal, and required no fancy energy to adapt to. The rods punched through the distracted, suffering Cthar ships, tearing through their organic armor with raw physical force. The fight was over in minutes. The human fleet suffered minor damage from a few lucky Cthar shots. The Cthar attack wing was a drifting cloud of organic debris. On the Concorde flagship, the silence was absolute. General Gore stared at the tactical screen. They had not fought a battle. They had fought a trick. A messy, undignified, incredibly effective trick. What was that?" whispered one of his aides. Gore had no answer. He replayed the data. The humans had used no advanced technology. They had used chemistry. They had used confusion. They had used the environment. They had treated the Cthar not as a terrifying enemy, but as a system with a bug. And they had found a way to exploit it. When Admiral Minsu's calm face appeared on the hologram for a post-battle report, he simply said, "The Hyades flank is secure for now. We are analyzing the debris. We believe we can refine the approach." General Gore could only nod, a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't hope. It was something more unsettling. It was the realization that the elders had been right. The humans didn't fight. They solved. And the solution they had just witnessed was both brilliant and deeply, deeply frightening. The Cthar were a force of nature. But the humans, he was starting to see, were the force that studied nature, took it apart, and used the pieces to build a trap. The victory at HY 77 was not seen as a real victory by the Concorde High Command. They called it a localized anomaly. The humans had used a clever trick, they reasoned, but the Cthar would adapt. The next attack would crush them. The Concorde focused its main fleet on defending the vital shipyards at the world of Kessel Prime. It was a logical, strategic move. Protect the means of building more ships. The humans, however, did not wait for the next attack. Admiral Minsu and his team studied every piece of data from the battle and from the Concorde's shared, if reluctant, intelligence streams. They noticed a pattern everyone else had missed. The Cthar swarms were incredibly coordinated, but that coordination had a source. Deep within each major fleet was a larger, slower, heavily protected ship. The Concorde had always assumed these were command vessels, like their own flagships. They had tried to destroy them before, but they were too well guarded. Engineer Subin looked at the energy readings from these ships. They didn't match the profiles of command centers. They pulsed with a low, constant signal that washed over the entire Cthar fleet. "It's not giving orders," she said to Captain June on the Dauntless Bridge. "It's more like a rhythm, a heartbeat. The smaller ships aren't thinking for themselves. They're synchronized to it like cells in a body." June understood immediately. "You cut the heart. The body goes into spasms." "But the Concorde is right," Minsu said, leaning over the map. "A direct assault on these coordinator nodes is suicide. Their defenses are perfect against a frontal charge. They are designed to stop the Concorde. Then we don't give them a front," June said, a slow smile spreading. "We don't charge. We appear." The plan was insane by Concorde standards. It relied on the human fleet's most dangerous, least reliable technology. Their short range faster than light drives. The Concorde used stable warp tunnels. Human skip drives were rougher, like jumping through a series of hoops. They were hard on the ships and dangerous to use near gravity wells. The Concorde considered them primitive and reckless. Task Force Aegis moved. Publicly, they sent signals about reinforcing a different weak point. Privately, they powered down and drifted into the shadow of a massive, storm-covered gas giant in the Hyades cluster. The churning magnetic fields and radiation would hide their energy signatures completely. For 3 days, there was no sign of them. The Concorde commanders assumed they were licking their wounds or had finally been destroyed. The main battle for Kessel Prime began. It was a disaster from the first moment. The Cthar fleet was massive, a swirling storm of bioships. They absorbed the Concorde's powerful energy volleys, their hulls already shimmering with new, adaptive layers. They pushed the Concorde lines back, closer and closer to the vulnerable shipyards. The view from the Concorde flagship was one of slow, inevitable death. Then something happened. At the very rear of the vast Cthar formation, space rippled. Not with the graceful opening of a warp tunnel, but with a series of sharp, violent flashes of light. It was as if space itself was having a seizure. From these flashes, the human fleet appeared. Not on the edge of the battle, but deep inside the Cthara's own territory, right on top of the coordinator node cluster. Their ships wobbled, their hulls glowing with heat from the brutal, short jumps. Alarms would be blaring inside, crews strapped in from the brutal turbulence. The Cthar did not understand. This was not a place enemies could be. Their defenses were all facing outward, toward the Concorde. For a long, terrible second, the Cthar swarm seemed to hesitate, its rhythm broken. Captain June, his hands gripping his command chair on the Dauntless, didn't hesitate. All ships, priority target. The pulsing vessels. Fire at will. Fire everything. What followed was not a battle of tactics. It was a point-blank slaughter. The human ships, still shaky from their jump, unleashed hell at a range where nothing could miss. Mass driver rods tore into the soft, unarmored rears of the coordinator nodes. Guided missiles, designed to burrow into rock, were reprogrammed to seek the unique energy signature and detonate inside the organic hulls. Pilot Taemin led a wing of small craft not in an attack run, but in a wild, confusing pattern, dropping clouds of sensor-jamming chaff and more of Subin's chemical irritants, creating a chaotic haze that further broke the Cthar coordination. The coordinator nodes didn't explode in fiery blasts. They burst. They ruptured like overripe fruit, spewing thick, glowing fluid into the vacuum. As each one died, a portion of the Cthar fleet simply stopped. Ships drifted, colliding with each other. Their attacks became wild, unaimed. The smooth, terrifying swarm became a confused mob. On the Concorde flagship at the main battle line, General Gore saw the change on his tactical screen. The relentless pressure on his front line suddenly eased. Whole sections of the Cthar fleet were now marked as disoriented or non-responsive. What happened? He demanded. A sensor officer, its voice trembling, reported. The human fleet, they are behind the enemy. They have destroyed the central coordination vessels. The Cthar hive mind in this sector is fragmenting. Gore felt a shock run through him. The impossible, the undignified, reckless impossible. He saw his chance. For the first time in a year, he saw an opening. His order was a raw shout. All Concorde units, push forward. Tech, now. The Concorde fleet, moments ago on the brink of destruction, surged forward with renewed desperation. They cut into the disorganized Cthar ships. It was not easy. The Cthar were still deadly, but it was no longer a one-sided fight. It was a battle. When it was over, the Cthar fleet was in full retreat, what was left of it. The shipyards of Kessel Prime were saved. The bridge of the Concorde flagship was filled with a stunned, exhausted silence. Then a slow building of cheers. Gore did not cheer. He pulled up the visual feed from the rear of the battle. He watched the human ships, battered and scorched, regrouping. They had not fought with grace or power. They had fought with a terrifying, brutal practicality. They had not broken the enemy's shield. They had severed its spine. He looked at the image of the Dauntless, its angular hull burned and pitted. He finally understood Elder Nissa's warning. The humans had not come as noble warriors. They had come as surgeons performing emergency battlefield amputation. It was messy, horrifying, and it had worked. The tide of the war had just turned. But as he looked at the drifting remains of the coordinator nodes, Gore wondered what other unthinkable operations these human surgeons had planned. The Great Hall on the Concord Fortress world was meant for celebrations. Its soaring arches were now filled with the low hum of quiet conversation and the smell of sterile air, not feasts. The victory at Kessel Prime had stopped the bleeding, but the war was far from over. It had, however, changed everything. A formal gathering had been called. Representatives of all Concord species were there. The elders, like Nissa, stood with a watchful stillness. The military leaders, like General Gore, stood stiffly in their formal uniforms, their wounds still fresh. The air was thick with a new emotion, a profound, unsettled gratitude. They had been saved by the thing they had been warned to fear. At the center of the hall, a human delegation stood. Admiral Min-Soo, in his simple gray uniform, Captain June with his serious eyes, Engineer Subin, looking more at the ancient stonework of the hall than at the aliens. Pilot Taemin, who seemed to be calculating the quickest exit routes. General Gore stepped forward. The respectful silence fell. He was not good at speeches of thanks. His voice was rough. Admiral, Gore began, the translator converting his clicks into human language. The Concord acknowledges your actions at Kessel Prime. You have saved many lives. Our shipyards. You have our thanks. Min-Soo gave a small, polite bow of his head. We are glad we could help, General. There was a pause. The question that had been burning in every Concord mind since the battle hung in the air. It was a junior Talonor science officer who finally dared to voice it, her voice sharp with confusion. How? She asked, stepping forward slightly. Your technology is not superior. Your ships are slower, your weapons are primitive kinetic impactors. By all our logic, you should have been destroyed in your first engagement. How did you do this? All eyes fixed on the humans. This was not a question of tactics, but of essence. Admiral Min-Soo looked at the young officer, then let his gaze travel over the assembled aliens, the graceful Viridi, the fluid Solen, the crystalline XYL, the proud Talonor and sturdy Stonefolk. He saw a galaxy that had known peace for millennia before facing its first true predator. You are correct, Min-Soo said, his voice calm and clear. Our technology is not better. But you asked the wrong question. You asked, what do you have? The elders, he said, nodding toward Nissa, asked a better question. What are you? He paused, choosing his words carefully. The elders cautioned you about us. They were right to. You see, our history is not like yours. You built a Concord. We never could. For almost all of our recorded time, we have been at war. Not with a monster from the stars, but with ourselves. Tribe against tribe. Nation against nation. Idea against idea. He saw the confusion on their faces. War was a tragic failure of politics to them. To him, it was a dreadful, recurring fact. Because of this, Min-Soo continued, we did not evolve as a single people with a single way of thinking. We evolved as thousands of competing groups, each forced to be more clever, more adaptive, more ruthless than the other just to survive the day. We turned every discovery, the forging of metal, the understanding of chemistry, the splitting of the atom, the coding of data, into a tool for conflict. Not because we wanted to, but because if we did not, someone else would, and they would use it against us. Captain June spoke next, his voice quieter, harder. You fight to preserve a perfect order. We have never known perfect order. We fight in chaos because we were born in it. The Kthar are a hive. You are a Concord. Both are about unity. We are the opposite. We are about fractured, competing, desperate individuality. A Kthar swarm cannot understand an enemy that does not have a central mind to disrupt. You could not understand an enemy that fights without a unified playbook. Engineer Subin added, almost to herself, but the microphones picked it up. You see a wall, you build a bigger cannon to break it. We see a wall, and we wonder if we can dig under it, or poison its mortar, or pay the person who built it to take it down, or just wait for the person inside to die of old age. We look for the system, and then we look for the cheapest, fastest way to break that system. Pilot Taemin grinned, a flash of teeth in the solemn hall. You fly beautiful, logical formations. I fly like I'm being chased by my older brothers trying to steal my lunch. Because I was. A soft murmur went through the crowd. The pieces were falling into a terrifying picture. General Gore felt a chill. So your advantage is your dysfunction? Minsu shook his head. No. Our advantage is that our survival was never guaranteed. Yours was, for so long that you forgot it could be any other way. The elders saw the scars on our history and knew what they meant. We are a species that has looked extinction in the face more times than we can count. Extinction by our own hand. The Kthar are just one more threat on a very long list. We do not fight them with the wisdom of peaceful ages. We fight them with the desperate, ugly, brilliant tricks of a species that has always been one bad day away from wiping itself out. You summon survivors. And survivors do whatever it takes. The hall was utterly silent. The gratitude in the air had now mixed with something colder. The humans had not come as knights. They had come as scavengers from a world of endless struggle, bringing the sharp, ruthless lessons of that world to their doorstep. Elder Nissa finally moved, a gentle rustle. Her mental voice filled the space, gentle and sad. You asked for a weapon, General. You believed a weapon was a thing you hold. Humanity is not a thing you hold. They are a force you unleash. And now we have all seen what that looks like. Admiral Minsu met her gaze and gave another small, acknowledging nod. It was not an agreement of pride, but of simple, grim fact. The caution had been real. The desperation had been real. And now the galaxy had to live with the result. The humans had not come to fight a war the Concord's way. They had come to end it the only way they knew how. The war was not over, but the Kthar were broken. The loss of their coordinator nodes was a wound they could not quickly heal. The human tactic of node snipping, as the Concord soldiers now called it with a mix of awe and dread, became the standard. But it was the humans who executed it best. Their brutal, short-range jumps and their tolerance for chaotic, close-quarters combat made them the perfect, terrifying tool for the job. Task Force Aegis was no longer sidelined. They were now the spear point of every major offensive. The Concord fleets would engage the Kthar from the front, a glorious and powerful distraction. Then, in a series of violent space-twisting jumps, the human ships would appear deep in the enemy's heart, a sudden cancer, and cut out its core. The victories piled up. Systems were reclaimed. The red stain on the star maps began to shrink. But a new silence grew in the corridors of Concord power. It was the silence that follows a necessary but terrible act done on the bridge of the U.S. Dauntless. The mood was quiet. Captain June looked at the latest star charts. They showed Concord space slowly returning to blue. He felt no celebration. He saw the way the Talonor officers now looked at his crew during joint briefings, not as saviors, but as dangerous, unpredictable animals that had been let off their leash. The gratitude was there, but it was thin, stretched over a deep well of fear. Engineer Subin noticed it too. The Concord scientists were desperate for her insights on Kthar biology, but they flinched when she explained her methods. Turning industrial coolant into acid seemed to them a violation of a natural order, not an invention. She ate her meals alone in the lab, preferring schematics to uneasy glances. Only Pilot Taemin seemed unchanged, but he saw it clearly. "They're scared of the dog that saved them from the wolf," he said to June one day, cleaning his flight suit. "Now they're worried the dog might like biting a little too much." On Earth, the news was one of triumph. Parades were planned. Politicians gave speeches about human ingenuity and galactic cooperation. But in the quiet mountain facility, Jihyun watched the raw data streams from the front. She saw the casualty lists, human and Concord. She saw the tactical logs of the human attacks, the brutal efficiency, the sheer violence of their solutions. She did not see heroes. She saw her own species' deepest, darkest skill set being used on a galactic stage. She felt a hollow pride and a deeper worry. The final meeting of the War Council was held after the Cthar Central Hive world was isolated. Their fleet was shattered, their communication silent. The cleanup would take years, but the threat was ended. In the Great Chamber, the atmosphere was solemn. The elders were present. General Gore stood to give his final report as military commander. He listed the victories, the sacrifices. He thanked each Concord species. Finally, he turned to the human delegation. The Concord, he said, the words slow and heavy, owes you a debt that can likely never be paid. You have saved our civilizations from annihilation. He bowed, a deep, formal gesture of his people. Admiral Minsu returned the bow. Gore straightened. The debt is owed, but the caution must begin. He was not speaking as a general now, but as a member of the galaxy. Your methods have shown us a way to win we could never have conceived. They have also shown us a reflection we find difficult to face. You are not like us, the elders tried to tell us. Now we know. He took a deep breath. Therefore, the Concord proposes a new treaty. An alliance, yes. Open trade. Cultural exchange. But with a single, specific condition. Minsu nodded, waiting. He had expected this. The human military, Gore said, will not be used as an offensive tool for Concord ambitions. Your fleet, your unique methods will be reserved. Only in the face of a truly existential threat, like the Cthar, will they be called upon. You will not be our soldiers. You will be our last resort, our final, terrible option. It was a statement of profound respect and profound fear. They were putting the human weapon back in its box, hoping never to open it again. Minsu looked around the room. He saw Nissa's slow, agreeing nod. He saw the relief on the faces of the younger species. They wanted to go back to their peaceful, logical galaxy. They wanted to forget the horror that had saved them. We agree, Minsu said simply. There was no other answer. To refuse would be to confirm every fear they had. The treaty was signed. The alliance was formalized. Task Force Aegis prepared for the long journey home, heroes to their own people, and something much more complicated to everyone else. On the journey back, Minsu stood on the quiet observation deck of the Dauntless. The stars slid by, peaceful and silent. Captain June joined him. They'll build statues of us back home, June said. And in the Concord, they will tell stories of us to their children to warn them, Minsu replied. The story of the fire they used to stop the flood. June was silent for a while. Do you think they'll ever really trust us? Minsu watched the stars. It doesn't matter. They understand us now. And we understand ourselves a little better, too. We saw what we can do when we are united, even in our broken way. Our test now is not winning a war. It is living in the peace we created. A peace that is afraid of us. Far away, in her garden under the artificial sun, Elder Nissa touched the petals of a fragile, blue flower. Her thoughts reached out to the other elders, a soft, sad whisper on the psychic winds. They have saved us from the devourers. Now we must learn to live with the survivors. The galaxy has grown older today. It has learned that not all monsters are beasts. Sometimes they are the ones who know how to kill monsters. Let us hope we never need our monsters again. In the dark between the stars, the human fleet sailed home, carrying with them the gratitude of a galaxy and its everlasting, careful caution.